My name is Noah Merrick, and the sea met me with a straight face the day I came to Greyhaven. The ferryman called it mercy. She's in a mood to behave, she said, one hand steady on the tiller, the other tucked into the pocket of a salt-stiff coat. Her name was Mara, and she had the sort of voice you'd listen for in fog. Don't trust it, the water here likes to pretend. The boat's little engine coughed and settled into a workable grumble. The harbour opened like the mouth of a stone bowl. Gulls counting our entrance with harsh, amused cries. On shore, the village hunched low against the cliff, roofs pitched like shoulders braced for a blow. Nets lay to dry along the seawall, and the air smelled of rope and diesel and the iron tang of kelp. I'd seen photographs of Greyhaven, grainy shots of the lighthouse, pale against a bank of cloud, but photographs are tidy liars. They don't show you the way the wind finds seams in your clothes. They don't show you the way your breath feels heavier, as if the air has been used before and you're borrowing it for a while. Beyond the harbour, out past a knuckle of dark rock, the lighthouse stood where the cliff flings itself into space. Tall, narrow, more bone than building, it wore its age without apology. Its glass eye caught a thin bar of sun and threw it back in a tired flash. There was no romance in it from this angle, only function. A spine, a staircase, a lens, a light. Keep the ships off the teeth, count the hours, endure. Mara pulled us alongside the main jetty, the soft certainty of a habit learned young. You'll want a trolley, she said. Steps are rough up there. I can run you and your boxes after I unload. I can manage, I told her, and she gave me a look that said, people always say that. We made a small procession anyway, Mara with two of the heavier crates, me with my suitcase and a box of books I probably didn't need. A boy trailed us at a careful distance, pretending not to be watching, then boldly closing the gap whenever we stopped. You the new keeper? He asked me once, then asked again before I'd finished answering. You staying through the storms? That's the plan. I found my voice turning softer here, as if volume might be punished, just for the season. Just enough to think you know it, Mara said, but there was no malice in it. She had the sort of face that looked like it had been carved by weather. If you smiled at it, it softened by degrees. The steep path up to the lighthouse began just beyond the last cottage, where the road dwindled into rock and scrub. The land pitched upward, stubborn against the seas-long arguments. Gorse clutched at the slope in wiry fists, and the white bones of old shells freckled the dirt. Halfway up, I stopped to turn, a habit or superstition, or both, and let the view find me. The houses looked paper small from here. The water beyond the harbour wall was a darker, colder blue, as if the colour thickened with depth and secrets. Mara waited without hurrying me. You grew up near the coast? She asked. Near enough, I said. Near enough to miss it every day I was away. Haven't lived by it in a long time. She nodded, lifted a crate to her hip. It comes back to you, she said, like a song you forgot you knew. The lighthouse door complained in a long old sigh when we opened it. Inside, the air was cooler and full of a smell I didn't know I'd been missing. Lamp oil, iron, paper, salt, damp. Footsteps made a hollow music in the round. The entry room was spare. Hooks on a rail, a bench scarred by generations of boots, a wall of pigeonholes labelled with fading names. E. Halfgreeny, M. Dunlin, A. Crow. Lives reduced to initials and the satisfaction of a straight line of letters. Mara set the crates down and tilted her head to listen to the place. Not much to it, she said, but if you live alongside something long enough, it starts to keep you. She nodded towards the spiral stairs. You'll want to see the lantern before light. We climbed, circling through shadow and light, the steps worn to a smooth deep where thousands of feet had thrust at them. The rail was a banister of cold certainty beneath my palm. Along the inner wall, I spotted the first marks. Little carven notches, names scratched with knives or nails, dates. Elias, 1952. Mara, 2001. I paused over that one. The M in particular had been cut with care. She caught me looking. Wasn't me, she said, and then smirked. All right, it was me. I was a kid. Everyone leaves something of themselves where they can't help it. At the top, the lantern room made a ring of light around us. The glass had been cleaned for my arrival. It always is. The lamp waited with patience. It was modern now, efficient, the sort of machinery that makes a person obsolete with good manners. Still, someone had polished the brass. Someone had thought the old metal deserved to shine. I stepped close to the glass and put my fingertips to the cool. The world was a gallery of greys and silvers, and the deep green of the shoulder of water where it reared against rock. The wind smoothed itself up here, then forgot to be cruel for a while. I could feel the lighthouse settle around me, as if testing my weight. I have the oddest thoughts in new places. I thought, if I speak, the building will know my voice. Mara left me with a ring of keys and instructions that felt simple until I tried to hold them all at once. You'll be fine, she said at the door, looking past me at the lanes of weather and water that braided the horizon. Greyhaven isn't unkind. It just doesn't bend to anyone's moods, but its own. Will you be back? Next supply run, she said, or sooner if the weather decides to make a fool of someone. She touched the rail with 2 fingers before she went, a small private blessing. When the door closed, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, like a bowl. I set to work making a place for myself in the rooms below the lantern. There is a rhythm to settling, a choreography you learn in lonely places. You choose a corner for your books. You choose a hook for your coat and dedicate it with the weight of wet fabric. You open all the small drawers, not because you need what's inside, but because what's inside needs to be seen to be content. I found a drawer of pencils, all sharpened to patient points, and another filled with folded cloth, polishing rags, soft and worn, like handkerchiefs that knew secrets. The bed in the keeper's room was narrow and decent, the mattress better than memory. The window there opened on the southern view. Dunes, a line of scrub pines, the long reach of the tide. Near the desk, I found a journal placed square in the middle, the way you'd set down a loaf of bread you were saving for later. New, with a black cloth cover, unmarked, save for a phrase written on the side of the front page in a hand that had learned patience from measuring instruments. The sea remembers all things. No name, no date. The ink had bled a little, as if the pen had paused there and the paper had taken the opportunity to drink. I tested the pen left beside it, smooth, light, then wrote my name below the line, as if signing a guest book at the edge of the world. Noah Merrick, keeper, spring. The words looked comfortable in their new house. I did not add a date. Dates have a way of making promises out of their numbers, and I'm careful with promises. I unpacked the rest. A little radio, a coil of extension cord because there's never enough power exactly where you want it, a tin of tea that had traveled more than I had lately. I set a kettle on the tiny stove and listened to its slow conversation with the heat. I am not a man who talks to himself, but I do talk to rooms. I say thank you to the ones that hold me well. I ask for patience from the ones that don't. The lighthouse offered nothing, which felt like a kind of respect. You'll have to learn me without hints, it seemed to say. I took my tea up to the lantern and sat with my back to the metal, watching a trawler push a white wake through the long unspooling of afternoon. There's something about high places that makes memory a cleaner thing. Thoughts arrange themselves at altitude. What matters floats, what doesn't sinks where it can wait. I thought of my father showing me how to tie a bowline with a story about a rabbit in a tree. I thought of the last apartment I'd left, its windows too clean, its air too thin, the way city light is always a little impatient. I thought of the letter that had come like a well-timed gull 3 months ago, offering a season's post at Greyhaven. If you have a mind for weather and patience for loneliness, it said, we could use a body who won't quarrel with the wind before breakfast. I drank my tea and tried not to quarrel with anything at all. Everything came down the slow way, with no rush to it. The horizon turned the color of wet slate, and then found its way to bruised blue. The lamp engages now with a whispered command from a switch you throw with 2 fingers. There's no drama, no sense of flint and determination, just a certainty that takes hold and stays. When the lens began to turn, the light swept the water with a kind eye. Down in the kitchen, I heated a stew from a jar and ate it with the sort of gratitude you deserve for first small successes. The spoon made a sound that the room liked. I opened a window to let in the night, and with it came a lowing foghorn from somewhere further down the coast, a steady reassurance that other lives were being counted and kept. The phone on the wall near the desk is the stubborn sort, wired, heavy, honest. I ran the village line because I wanted my voice to be caught by someone else's ear, just for a moment, to weave it into the fabric of the place. Greyhaven store, a woman said, bright with the confidence of being indispensable. "What do you need, love?" "Nothing tonight," I said. "Just letting you know the keeper's arrived. Noah Merrick." "Good," she said, as if I were a parcel that had been late. "I'm Bess. Welcome, Noah. If you find you're missing anything, I've got it, or I'll pretend I do, and fetch it by morning, weather permitting." "Thank you, Bess." "And if the light hiccups, you call Mara," she added. "She listens better than the rest of us when it comes to the moods of things." After the call, I stood a while with my hand on the receiver, feeling the last small warmth of the motor. I have always liked the way old machines keep their secrets, but not from you. I made my first entry in the journal that night, writing with the measured care of someone learning how to move again after a long ride in a cramped seat. Arrival calm, harbor kind, lighthouse sound. Found the journal and the phrase inside it. It feels borrowed here, in the way all good places do at first. Wind steady, south by west. The smell in these rooms is the same as the smell in a memory I don't have yet. I stopped and listened because something in the air had shifted. Not loud, not enough to call it sound exactly. A tremor of a tension in the walls. I waited, pen midair, while the lighthouse waited with me. When nothing declared itself, I finished the entry with a line that felt like a promise to no one but myself. I will keep the light and mind the weather. I will be patient. I will try not to wish for anything more than I am given. Sleep was a cautious friend that first night. I lay in the narrow bed and listened to the steady breath of the sea, which is to say, I listened to the intervals between waves, because that is where the voice is. A ship horn sounded somewhere, out beyond the reach of my light, and if I had been the kind of person to pray, I would have prayed for the men on it to find their way to morning. Instead, I counted the rotations of the lens above me. 1, 2, 3, until numbers stopped being numbers and were just a way to be carried. I woke to tapping, not the gentle, irregular kind of rain, not the random tisk of a loose bit of wire, a measured, patient tap, 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 like a knuckle against a window. I lay very still and counted the space between. 5 slow breaths, then again. Tap, tap, tap. It stopped when I sat up, as if whatever it was reached the end of its instructions or its nerve. I could feel the lighthouse around me, listening to see what I'd do. The room had a companionable darkness. I found my slippers with my feet and stood, aware suddenly of every board in the floor, every nail that had decided it would hold. Thank you. The window looked south over the line of dunes. Nothing moved there but a suggestion of mist. The glass was cold against my fingers. I waited until my breath had found a rhythm I recognized, and only then unlatched it and pushed it open. The night touched my face, curious and colder than my memory of it ever is. Nothing, which is not to say there was absence. The sea does not allow for such things. There was the weight of the dark, and the geometry of the lighthouse shadowing itself, and the sense unmistakable that I had woken at the exact moment that something had finished happening. When sleep comes back to you, there's no arguing with it. I tucked my hands into the pockets of my robe and let the cold make a more honest man of me. On the sill, where the salt dries in delicate crystals no brush ever entirely defeats, I saw a line drawn by moisture. No, not a line. A trail, thin as a thread, curving from the frame down to the inside lip, as if a droplet had paused and then changed its mind. I touched it, and it broke like spun sugar. In the morning, the world had the satisfaction of edges again. Sun found the lighthouse with a pale consideration. I brewed coffee superior to anything I had the right to expect from a tin and a burner, and took it down the cliff path to the cove, because there are places it is polite to introduce yourself to as soon as you can. The cove lived where the cliff had decided to keep a secret for itself. The path twitched back twice through the gorse and then let me down onto a crescent of sand crowded with the shined bones of driftwood. The tide was in the mood to be sociable. Waves came up in orderly applause, not the drunk tumbling invitation of a storm. I walked the line where water fingers stone, turning over shells, limpets like old buttons, a scallop with a crack that looked like it might tell you a story if you held it between your palms long enough. Further up, beyond the reach of this tide, a drift of seaweed lay like hair. There was a bottle on the sand. Oh, I know what you're thinking. Of course there was. Perhaps I thought it too, as I saw the green of it winking like an eye where the foam retreated. But the mind is good at pretending not to be surprised by things it can't explain. I stepped toward it with the studied disinterest of a man examining a sensible length of rope or a piece of broken crate, as if announcing to the universe that I was unremarkable and would appreciate it if the universe would keep me that way. The bottle was a sturdy sort, with a lip meant for a cork. The cork was present and had done good work, swollen tight. Inside, something pale lay curled. Paper, old or wanting to seem so. I stood there with the bottle in my hand and felt the ordinary weight of it and the extraordinary suggestion. The tide reached for my boots, then shrugged and went about its business. I did not open it there. I don't know why. I only know that some first things should be done indoors, with a table under your hands and a chair under your weight, and the sense that you're not about to be laughed at by the weather. Back at the lighthouse, I set the bottle on the desk with a care that felt like a vow. I fetched a little knife from the drawer, sharp, with the nicked handle of a tool used kindly, and levered the cork free. The smell that came out was not of anything romantic, just trapped air, a little salt, a suggestion of damp that belonged to someplace not precisely here. The paper unfurled with the stubbornness of a thing that had learned to be its own shape. I weighed one edge with a salt tin and the other with my mug. The writing wasn't ornate. No loops for show, no careless flourish. It was plain and certain, the way you write when you know you'll be read by a stranger you'd like to understand you the first time. It said, Elias, the tide keeps what it likes. Don't be afraid of that. I've seen the light from the south path. If you leave the lantern at half on a calm night, I'll know you meant it. There was no signature. I read it again, slower, as if the second pass might reveal the trick of it. The name at the top, Elias, caught at something in me the way a burr finds cloth. I'd seen the name upstairs, cut into stone by a hand that had meant it. Elias, 1952. That was 50-odd years ago. More ink in the journals than I could count between then and now. More storms, more keepers, more ordinary days than either of those. I didn't have to be clever to guess how the letter would have been addressed to me if someone had meant me to have it. And yet there is a kind of attention the world sometimes pays that feels as if it knows your own name, even when it doesn't say it. I startled at a tap against the window then, just the glass settling, or the wind walking past with a casual knuckle. The sound folded into the room as if it had been expected. I placed the letter beside the journal and looked from one to the other. The sea remembers all things. I wanted to scoff then. I wanted to call it sentiment and move on. But there are words that refuse to stay flat on a page. They lift a little at the corner, and you find yourself wanting to see what's under them. I made a second entry. Found a bottle this morning, paper inside in good condition. Addressed to Elias. Not a prank. Sealed tight, cork sound, glass worn. Words simple, unaccusing. The kind of letter you write when you believe in someone else's competence more than your own. I don't know why that's what I think, but I do. I remember thinking at dawn that I woke because something finished happening. Maybe this is the thing that finished, or maybe it began then and is finishing now, as I write about it. The tide keeps what it likes. I am not afraid of that yet. The afternoon passed with the business of a first day. Testing the lamp again, inspecting the parapet for loose bolts, finding a leak in the west-facing window frame that would want a word with me before the next rain. The village was a collection of small noises below, the thunks of crates, a laugh, a dog that had something sensible to say about a gull. The world felt held in place by routine, and I let that hold me too. Near dusk, Mara's boat nosed back into the harbour, and I could make out the set of her shoulders, even at the distance. Easier, perhaps for having found the day workmanlike and fair. I did not wave. Some distances deserve their respect. When night came, I set the lamp to its slow, generous turning, and went back downstairs to make a second cup of tea I didn't strictly need. I kept the letter on the desk where I could glance at it, not because I expected new words to appear, but because the presence of it accounted for something the room felt it needed. The wind came up a little after 10, the way a cat climbs a chair, soft at first, then decisive. The lighthouse made its small companionable groans. I had the sense, once or twice, of another set of feet on the stairs, right behind mine, just at the edge of hearing. If I stopped, the sensation stopped. If I walked, The rhythm matched me. I told myself it was the echo of my steps, doubled and brought back to me with a delay. The mind is kind that way when it chooses to be. I took the letter up to the lantern room around midnight because it seemed greedy to keep it to myself, there in the circle of light meant for others. I stood with it in the glow and read it again, then looked out toward the south path. A faint line of paler dark along the shoulder of the cliff. Half, I said out loud. My voice sounded right-sized in the room. Half on a calm night. The night was calm enough to flatter itself. I could have left the lamp at full, and no ship would have scolded me for it. I could have dimmed it by half and still served any sailor within reach. There are procedures, there are rules. In places like this, they are both a comfort and a creed. But the letter had the shape of a request, made without the expectation of yes. I put my hand on the switch and did nothing. There is a kind of decision that arrives like a tide. It takes its time, and then it happens all at once. I thought of the boy at the jetty, asking if I'd stay through storms. I thought of the line of moisture on the morning's windowsill, thin and certain, like a sentence going someplace important. I left the light at full. Back downstairs, the room felt different, and I disliked that I couldn't assign the difference to an obvious change. The bottle lay on its side now, the glass sweating a little as if it had been moved from one temperature to another. I had not left it like that. I'm not careless in new places. The tap of the window came again, soft as a fingernail. Not rain, not wire, not imagination. A conversation starter sort of a tap. Gentle, polite, as if to say, "All right then, keeper, since you're awake, shall we begin?" I went to the window with the slow caution of someone approaching a skittish dog and put my palm against the cool glass. "I hear you," I said, because names have to start somewhere. From the corner of my eye, the journal looked different, ridiculous as that is to write. I turned and lifted it and felt the lightest resistance, as if the page beneath the last one I'd written had stuck to it and then reluctantly let go. I flipped it open and found, on the very bottom edge of a blank page where no hand of mine had yet strayed, a smudge of salt like the ghost of a fingerprint. Not a print you'd see in a detective's folder, nothing clear enough to swear to, just a whirl and line suggestion, the memory of touch. I touched that spot with my thumb, and it felt like touching the place your own skin used to hurt. The wind leaned in close, testing the frame. The lamp kept its slow turning with the patience of old saints and good machinery. I set the journal down, closed it carefully, and laid the letter on top. The bottle rolled the slightest degree, found a knot in the wood of the desk, and stopped there with a sound like a small decision being made. I went to bed without turning on the radio because I did not want any voice in the room tonight that wasn't the one the sea made by accident. Sleep came faster, as if satisfied I had done at least one small thing right. I woke once to the sound of a gull arguing with a dream, and once to the sensation of someone passing my door on the landing, But those are the sorts of things a house and a man must negotiate between them without outsiders keeping score. Morning found me with my hand already reaching for the pen, as if it had crept there in the night and taken up residence. I wrote without thinking too hard about who might one day read it. Second day. Wind has a mind. Found a letter meant for Elias. I will not say yet what I think it means. I will say only this. I have the feeling of arriving in the middle of a conversation and being asked to nod as if I've heard the first half. I'm willing to nod for now. I closed the journal and listened for the tap at the window. It did not come. The room for the moment was content. The kettle complained to be useful, and I obliged it. Outside, the tide was out, in the stubborn way it leaves the cove bare to make its point. I counted the steps to the lantern without climbing them, and in the counting realized the oddest part of it all. I felt less alone than I had any right to feel. Not watched, not haunted, just accompanied. I think that is where all good mysteries begin, not with fear, but with the particular relief of discovering that the world is bigger and maybe kinder than the size you'd given it the day before. I finished my coffee and set the cup on the desk beside the letter addressed to a man from another year. If you'd been there then, if you'd been listening the way I was, you might have heard it too, the tiniest, most cautious sound at the window, a patient, familiar tap. Tap, tap, tap. And that, I suppose, is how the first entry ends, with a sense that something is waiting just on the other side of the glass, polite enough to ask permission, persistent enough to return. The sea remembers all things. I don't know that I believe it, but I am beginning to think the sea remembers names. N. Merrick, Keeper, Greyhaven.